Jeremy. Shouts out to Dark Matter. Shouts out to Max Wave. Shouts out to your Quantum. Shouts out to Mr. Good Citizen. Shouts out to I Am Jacob. Thank you guys for coming in. Shouts out to Twins Mom. Shouts out to Krog. Shouts out to everyone that is in the live. Shouts out to OG Brand. Thank you so much for coming in. And today, as you can see, the topic of today is, should Donald Trump be impeached? I repeat, should Donald Trump be impeached? That is the topic of today. And before I start, I have to give a disclaimer to protect the channel. Once again, before I start, I have to give a quick disclaimer to protect the channel. And thank you guys for coming in. Fair use, copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, commenting, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. And thank you guys for coming in. Now, there has been a lot going on this week, okay, when it comes down to Donald Trump's administration, as well as his effects of how everything has not been affected only here in America, but how he has affected worldwide. Yes, I repeat, how he has affected everything, even on a world level. And yes, thank you guys for coming in. Now, before I start, I have to give a little brief of what's just been going on this week alone. Just yesterday, if anybody is familiar with the Dodge Department of Government Efficiency, department that was developed by Elon Musk, as well as Vivek and Donald Trump. The Congress held their first hearing in conversations in regards to the Dodge Department yesterday. And with this congressional hearing, it was very, very separate. And when I say separate, you can clearly see the difference. And I don't want to say it, but it's the truth. You can clearly tell the difference between Democrat and Republicans, because a lot of Democrats are very upset with the actions that have been going on here in America. And one of the heavy executive orders that has made headlines is when it comes down to a number of executive orders of Donald Trump dismantling various agencies and departments. And one of the departments that made headlines when it comes down to the federal workers, when it comes down to USAID, when it comes down to USAID agency. And I want people to understand this, right? Because this was questioned. A lot of people have been criticizing Donald Trump when it comes down to Elon Musk, because people have been saying, well, he's not an American. I want people to understand this. Elon Musk did arrive here in America and became a citizen at the age of 31. Okay? If you guys don't know, he is originally from South Africa. Right? And also, if you guys don't know, he is the richest billionaire in the world. But the question is, this is what Democrats are, especially during the congressional hearing yesterday, when they had a conversation in regards to the new department, Dodge Department. What are Elon Musk's reasons? What are his reasons for even coming into this administration, right? What are his real reasons? Because we have to be honest. We have to be honest. It's not about money because he has the money, right? We can't say it's because of the money. He has billions and billions of dollars, right? And I want people to understand this, okay? And this is one thing we cannot just turn the book on. America is $36 trillion in debt. And here in America, for each taxpayer, right? For each taxpayer, that means that each and every last one of us owes $323,000. And we have to do something. We have to do something. And please, ladies and gentlemen, please be respectful in the comments. We can't agree to disagree, but we have to, quote unquote, be respectful in the comments. Now, I will say this. There was a number of topics that Democrats, want to pin and point out. But the thing is, I'm going to be honest, I've said this before. Everybody's at fault. And the reason I questioned, the question was, should Donald Trump be impeached? Because now critics, because they don't like, both, I'm going to say both Democrats and Republican side. Because in addition to yesterday, Republican Mitch McConnell, he disagreed with our new, yes, I have to congratulate her. If you guys don't know, it was announced yesterday that our new, I just want people to we got to just tell it for what it is. Our new Director of National Intelligence, Miss Tulsi Gabbard, okay, she is officially the Director of National Intelligence, and it was held, the confirmation, it was held yesterday as well. But the Republican Mitch McConnell, he was the only Republican that voted against her. House of Senate voted 52 to 48 in favor of Ms. Gabbard to be the Director of National Intelligence. And that's why I want to make sure we're on the same page. Like, Donald Trump's administration, the current Donald Trump's administration is coming in more aggressive, and some people, majority Democrats, unfortunately, are not in favor of things that Donald Trump is currently putting into motion. Let's just be honest. A lot of people are not in on the same page. But I want people to understand this once again. And if you live here in America, please take note. And this was discussed during the congressional hearing yesterday, the first congressional hearing in regards to Dodge Department. No matter what your views and opinions are, if you live here in America and you are a taxpayer, because we are $36 trillion in debt, I want people to understand that. That means that each of us, owe $323,000. I want people to understand that. In addition to that, because of this huge deficit, the dollar will be worth nothing in years. And if nothing doesn't get done, Social Security, according to what was discussed during the congressional hearing, Social Security will go bankrupt in 8 years. 8 years. And as for Medicare, I want people to also understand this. As for Medicare will go bankrupt in 10 years. So something has to be done. Something has to be done. Now, what are some of the actions that Donald Trump is doing? Now, I will tell you, from his first term as president, when he was the 45th president, to now when he is the 47th president, one thing that I say he has done, he's not only being more aggressive, but he's also responding to technology advancements, right? And when I say that, look at who he pulled in. He pulled in Elon Musk. And I want to say he pulled in Vivek, but Vivek dropped out, which I'm not surprised he did. According to Vivek, his reasoning on dropping out is because he stated that he wants to be more on a constitutional standpoint. And he wants to be more of a voice in Ohio. And if you guys don't know, he is supposedly going to run as governor of Ohio. Now, when it comes down to Vivek, I just wish he would have stood on that prior to this. I wish he would have stood on that prior to this. Why? Because now Vivek has dropped out of the Dodge department, right? And now you only have Elon Musk, who the Democrats and majority of the people in Democrat, they are pointing fingers straight at Elon, pointing it straight at Elon. Now, I will say this, just like I stated, something has to be done, right? And congratulations, like I stated too, first, before I go furthermore into this, I have to congratulate Miss Tulsi Gabbard. I have to congratulate her, as well as Pam Bondi, who is the new, yes, she is the new Attorney General, State Attorney General. But I have to call it for what it is. I have to call things out for what it is. Right? Now, Pam Bondi, she is now the official Attorney General. But my issue that's going on with Miss Pam Bondi, I really want her to, I really wish that when it comes down to Mayor Eric Adams, I really wish that the charges would not have been dropped. And if you guys don't know who Mayor Eric Adams is, he is the current mayor in New York, whose charges, yes, all of his charges have been dropped. Unfortunately, they've been dropped. But the question is, why? Why were his charges dropped? Because some people will say, according to Donald Trump, he was not treated fairly. Eric Adams was not treated fairly. But that goes back to, like I just stated, because here we have it. Democrats are coming in and saying, well, that just shows the corruption, because Eric Adams is the same person that was, quote unquote, supporting for the immigrants. But if you guys can go back, soon as Donald Trump becomes president, Soon as he becomes president, Mayor Eric Adams starts to change up. And one of the first initiatives that showed his change up is he discontinued the vouchers for the immigrants. Now, I will say this. When it comes down to the illegal, undocumented immigrants, should they get vouchers? No. 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 Because guess what? It's coming out of our tax paying money. So no, I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it at all. Now, I will say this. This, I know for a fact, the Democrats are coming in and saying, well, Eric Adams his charges should have not been dropped. And if you guys don't know what the charges are, just to keep it short and simple, he had a number of charges in regards to fraud, in regards to, let's say it this way, federal charges that were in the same district as Sean Combs in the Southern District of New York. He was charged by prosecutors in the same district, and he was looking at upwards of almost 40 years of federal prison time. But all that is washed away. All that is washed away. Now, me personally, I feel that the Trump administration should have not even touched Eric Adams. Should have not even touched him. Because you're gonna have some individuals, and I want to be non-biased when I say this, but it's going to be Democrats. They're going to find a way to say what? Well, this shows the corruption. Eric Adams is right along with Donald Trump, so of course he's going to bail Eric Adams out. Right? Of course. And yes, Timothy, yes, I'm talking live. Shout out to Timothy Clifford. Yes, this is live. Thank you guys for coming in. Please hit that like button. Please hit that like button. Please subscribe to the channel if you would like to support the channel even more. You can even provide a super sticker if you wish. So yes, Timothy, shout out to Timothy. Yes, this is live. Going into the comments, I just glanced at it. Going into the comments, please hit that like button. Please subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys for coming in. All I ask, Brian says, thank God for Trump. Avenger says no. Dean says no. He does not feel that Donald Trump should be impeached. Thank you guys for coming in. Dark Matter says no, he should not be impeached. And thank you guys for coming in. And like I stated, we have a lot to do. We have a lot to do. And when I say we have a lot to do, we as not only here in America, Your Quantum says, I don't know if I can repeat what Your Quantum said in the comments, but they do not agree with Mitch McConnell. And you're incorrect, Devin. That is not true. But thank you for coming in. Thank you for coming in, Devin. I welcome everybody. I don't pick sides on this channel. We welcome everybody as long as you are respectful. And shout out to Local Things. Local Things says hello, everyone. And like I stated, please be respectful. David says Elon pulled Vivek in. Local Thing says Trump never did anything good. DR says Elon and Trump are both robbing us while pretending to find fraud. Now, I will say this. I was just skimming through the chat. Timothy Clifford says, what about Joe Biden's son? Now, I'm glad you asked that, Timothy, right? What about him? Now, this is why, I don't pick sides, because when it comes down to Joe Biden, I'm kind of disappointed in him. I'm kind of disappointed in him at the fact that he said one thing. I don't want to go back into it, right? But let's just move forward. Hunter Biden ends up getting pardoned. He ends up getting pardoned by Joe Biden. And not only does Joe Biden pardons Hunter Biden, his son, but he pardons Liz Cheney. And I said, wait a minute, how is it and why is he pardoning Liz Cheney? And God, good grief. Look at how the tables have turned now, and we are in February. And why am I bringing up Liz Cheney? Because Liz Cheney was in connection when it came down to the U.S. aid. Yes, U.S. aid agency. And if you guys don't know, right, this week, USAID agency has officially it is, let's just say it's no more. And yesterday, I want to make sure we're on the same page. Yesterday, a judge ruled in favor of the Trump administration. Yes. U.S. District Judge George Toole of Massachusetts at 5:30 yesterday ruled in deferred resignation deal, stating that it can move forward. And the resignation deal that Trump administration offered to federal workers, known as fork in the road, the judge ruled that the legal group that sued Trump administration, filed on behalf of labor unions, were not, according to the judge, were not directly impacted by the order. And as such, should be denied. According to the judge, the unions do not have the required direct stake in the fork directive. And he added, the union lacks, according to him, his court lacks jurisdiction to even deal or address the union's matters. Now, how and why is all this coming into play? Because the deadline for the federal workers to accept the buyout was yesterday at 7 p.m. And I want people to understand this. a number of people's lives are affected because according to my research and findings, 2 million federal workers, I repeat, 2 million federal workers worked with the government. And out of that 2 million, only 75,000, less than 3%, accepted the buyout that was offered by the Trump administration. And hello, Northern Dame. Shout out to Northern Dame. Thank you for coming in. And this is why I want people to really just take a step back, because a lot of these federal workers, okay, a lot of these federal workers were working from home, okay? And you have to also put that into play. They were working from home, right? So now, when it comes down to, well, there are people are saying, well, why don't Donald Trump be impeached? He is going against the Constitution. This is what they're saying. This is what they're saying. But the bigger question is, right? If you're gonna say Donald Trump should be impeached, then what about Joe Biden? What about Bill Clinton? Because yes, the House of Representatives impeached Bill Clinton, but it was later waived by the House of Senate. Now, why am I putting all this into play? Because I'm telling you guys, right? Nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. But I tell you right now, something had to be done, because we are in a deficit here in America, and we're in debt here in America. We are. And I'm going to also say this, because I see the comments when it comes down to Elon Musk, right? And shout out to Avengers. When it comes down to Elon Musk, my question is to a lot of congressional members, why hasn't anybody else stepped up? Why did someone such as Elon Musk had to come in anyway? Ask yourself that question. There's too much going on here. Now we're in the times where Elon Musk is over a department that has found out, according to him, that U.S. aid was wasting a lot of money and spending billions. Because I want people to understand this from what I have looked up when it comes down to the USA. How much does the USA, should I say, did the USAID agency spend on a yearly basis when it comes down to these various countries? According to reports, 17.2 billion was spent for Europe. 12.1 billion was spent for sub-Saharan Africa. 5.5 billion to other regions. 1.1 billion to East Asia. 1.8 billion. It is a large amount of money. 3.9 billion to the Middle East and North Africa. All of this money, billions and billions of dollars, are being spent or should I say was being spent, right? But here in America, remember what I just stated, we are $36 trillion deficit. $36 trillion. So we have to do something. And I'm going to tell you right now, now I will say this, if you disagree with all of these executive orders that Donald Trump is signing and the freezing of a number of agencies that Trump administration is doing, I should say, then my question to you, right? What else could there have been done? What else could have been done? Now, I will say this. One specific trade agreement that started all of this commotion, some would say, well, Donald Trump started it. Some would say he started it, right? And what do I mean when some people would say he started it? Some would say he started it when he replaced the North American Free Trade Agreement. He replaced the North American Free Trade Agreement with the United States, Mexico, and Canada agreement back on November the 30th of 2018. Some would say that, right? And I don't know who said it in the comments, because someone, and shouts out to Canada, but someone said in the comments in regards to they feel they have lost trust as a Canadian with Donald Trump because Donald Trump didn't follow through or wasn't a quote unquote man of his word, right? And I said, what is he talking about, right? What is he talking about? Now, I gotta be honest. When it came down to this agreement that he replaced back in 2018, Donald Trump, when it came down to a new agreement between Mexico, United States, and Canada, right? Now, this was, let's just call it for what it is. This was another free trade agreement, right? Let's call it for what it is. It was just like so many other free trade agreements. It was just, how can I say it? It was just another trade agreement that put the United States in a better standing, right? It raised things and put the United States in a better standing. But now people such as the person that I read in the comments in this chat, it raised concerns when it comes down to trusting Donald Trump, because one of the agreements within this agreement, okay, one of them, I'm just going to read some things, okay? When it comes down to the United States, Mexico, when it comes down to this United States, Mexico, Canada agreement, one of the major components that this agreement that Donald Trump, he dropped the ball. This agreement stated it stated that every 6 years, Mexico, Canada, and United States would meet to assess each other's performance or progress and address or modify changes if needed. That was one of the agreements within this agreement. But Donald Trump, remember what I said, he's coming in more aggressive now than he did the first term. He's coming in more aggressive, right? And why is he coming in so aggressive? Because he's looking at how much all of these other countries are making all this money, and here we are in America, we're $36 trillion in debt. And when I say all these countries, right? When I say all these countries, you're talking about China, over 400, according to reports, over $400 billion China has made when it comes down to money. This is what China is making. When it comes down to this, right? And then you have Mexico. Then you have Canada. But my only issue is, why did Donald Trump, why did he just go past his own agreement? He just bypassed it. He just bypassed his own agreement. Now, when it comes down to the Prime Minister of Canada, and I'm also looking at the comments, I will agree with what they are saying about the Prime Minister. I feel that the Prime Minister is not the voice, based off of not just what I'm saying, but this is what Canadians are saying. This is what Canadians are saying about the Prime Minister. And I felt when it came down to the Prime Minister's response, when he held his press conference, he stated as if he was for the Canadians. But I got to tell you guys this: the Prime Minister has not been for the Canadians for a long time, especially during the pandemic. Especially during the pandemic. He's not. He has not been for the Canadians. And like I stated, when it came down to the North American Free Trade Agreement that was signed in 2000, my apologies, the North American Free Trade Agreement that was signed during the Bill Clinton administration, that Donald Trump ended up having replaced. I do feel that the North American Free Trade Agreement, it was too much. It did not help. It did not help America. Didn't. And when it came down to the NAFTA, as what they call the North American Free Trade Agreement, it was created to eliminate most tariffs and other trade barriers when it came down to products and services between whom? Mexico, Canada, and US. But like I stated, it gave too much. It gave too much. So now Donald Trump is coming in He's coming in full force and saying, okay, 25% tariffs have to be applied when it comes down to steel, when it comes down to aluminum, 10% on China. He is applying so much. He's coming full force. But I want people to understand this. There has been so much free trade going on amongst countries. Something had to give. But like I stated, people are wondering, should Donald Trump be impeached because he didn't follow through on his word? Because I read to you earlier when it came down to the USMCA agreement, United States, Mexico, Canada. When it came down to the United States, Mexico, Canada agreement, one of the agreements is, it stated that every 6 years, the countries Mexico, Canada, US would meet to assess performance, progress, or address or modify changes if needed. So you have Mexico, Canada, they was looking like, well, you could have talked to us. You could have talked to us before you did all of this. As a matter of fact, it was you that brought this agreement in 2018 to replace Bill Clinton's free trade agreement back in 1994, the North American Free Trade Agreement. So why not have came to us now? Some people would say Donald Trump is showing that, he will say one thing and do another. He will say one thing and do another. Right? Now, like I stated, this particular matter is more to talk about when it comes down to tariffs. Right? And hello, Citizen Z. We do not do that in this particular chat. We welcome everybody. We welcome everybody. We welcome all parties, all genders, all races in this channel and in this chat. Going back into the comments, thank you guys for coming in. Please hit that like button. Please subscribe to the channel. And please also be respectful in the chat. Dennis says in the chat, Americans shouldn't get vouchers either. We need to work. And that is one of the things people have, when it comes down to even what Donald Trump is doing with the federal workers. Right? He signed one of the executive orders basically stating that if you are a federal worker, you need to come back to work and not work from home. Now, my biggest question with all of this is, right, 2 million people have been affected or will be affected. And that is the number of federal workers that were working. Right? So now it goes to what's to come. And when it comes down to the Trump administration, he's basically putting how can I say this? He wants to put a lot of things back into the state's hands, more so than it all just being dealt with in Washington, D.C. That's basically the gist of it. if you really want to get to it. And why do I say that? Because Russell Vaught, okay, he has been officially, as of February the 7th, he is the director of the Office of Management. That's what he was. That's what he had served. But he will now, at this point, at this particular point, he is now in office, and he is one of the authors to Project 2025. So people have to understand, when it comes down to Russell Vaught, who's now in the Office of Management and Budget, if you have read Project 2025, which is 922-page book, he's the author. He's one of the authors when it comes down to the responsibilities of spending, budgeting, and I tell you right now, at this particular point, there has been too much overspending. It's been too much. It's too much overspending. And not enough going back into America. It's too much. And thank you guys for coming in. Now, like I stated, I wanted to actually break down when it comes down to, because I did say I was going to break it down the last live, and I didn't break it down, but I want to talk about the United States Agency for International Development, also known as USAID. Okay, this is one of the agencies that has been dismantled. And this particular agency, like I stated before, it was speaking in past tense now. And I absolutely agree, Timothy. Thank you. Too many kickbacks. Too many kickbacks. Now, when it comes down to the USAID, it's supposed to be paid and authorized by the Congress annually. But it has not been handled effectively. Hasn't. It hasn't been handled effectively. Now, when it comes down to the USA, since it has been dismantled, it's being merged with the State Department. Hence why Marco Rubio, State of Secretary, is acting head of USAID. Now, I will say this, it's a lot of pressure being put upon Marco Rubio. It really is. It is a lot of pressure being applied to him, because here he is. He has to act as head of USAID in addition to doing his job as State of Secretary. That's a lot. That is a lot. Now, according to the press conference that was held, one of the number of press conferences that Donald Trump has held, he had one with Elon Musk. And according to them, there has been billions that has been found mishandled. Billions. And thank you guys for coming in. Thank you so much. Now, when it comes down to the USAID, okay, It is an agency that was supposed to manage $40 billion yearly for programs in assisting preventing diseases, provide relief for disasters for other countries, and support economic development in underdeveloped countries. Now, this is just a little bit of what USA is supposed to have been doing, right? Notice what I said, supposed to. And what was its mission? Now, according before it was pulled, the USA's mission was supposed to support global stability and assist in challenges with poverty, diseases, political instability. But ladies and gentlemen, when it comes down to this USA, it's been nothing of the such. Nothing of the such. Now, people want to criticize Donald Trump and say, well, he's signing all these executive orders. I want people to realize the USA was created through an executive order by JFK. JFK, John F. Kennedy, when he was president, and what was the USA was supposed to be used for? To relieve the stress of State Department. Notice what I just said. USA was created to relieve the stress off the State Department. But look what's going on now. Look what is going on now. And I'm gonna finish. I'm gonna finish before I make my point. Because of the United States Aid Agency, it was created to relieve the State Department, because before this agency came in, it was a number of agencies just scattered all over the world. All over the world. And people have to understand, during this time, this was during the Cold War. This was during the Cold War. So people have to understand, when it comes down to this US aid, it was meant for one thing, but it just took over. It took over. And why do I say it took over? Because now it is not being, or should I say, it was not being used for what it was meant for over the years. Now, one thing I noticed about during the press conference that Donald Trump had with Elon Musk, Donald Trump spoke about how they have found, according to the Dodge Department, Elon Musk, a number of contracts that were supposed to have ended within 3 months. They've just been going on for decades with contracts. And that's why I say there has to be enough. It has to be a stop. It has to be some type of organization somewhere. Because at this particular time, people are throwing out billions and billions of dollars, and is not being conducive. So much to the point, and I will say this, yes, Elon Musk was wrong when he mentioned about the $50 million $50 million of condoms. He spoke about he misspoke, and he did admit his inaccurate findings, as they say. Okay. He did misspeak about that, because he at one point he stated that 50 million condoms was provided for Gaza. That was false. That was false. That was inaccurate. Right? Now, this was during the press conference. Why am I bringing this up? Because the congressional hearing yesterday on the Dodge Department, this is what they were talking about. This is what one of the House of Representatives, Jasmine Crockett, she spoke about how Elon Musk was caught in a lie. That's what she said. That's what she said. But my question is, how many times have politicians been caught in lies? How many times have politicians, period, been caught in lies? Right? And like I stated, right, I did not agree with everything when it comes down to this current administration, but I will support that something needs to be done, and Donald Trump is doing it. And shout out to Green Vegan. Green Vegan says, going back into the comments, shout out to Green Vegan. Green Vegan says, true or not, once it's out there, it's out there. You are absolutely right. Gotta highlight it. Thank you for coming in, that Green Vegan. And in regards to that, right, what she stated, this is why you have to be careful when you say things, when you do things, because you don't know how people will respond, right? You don't know how people will respond and when they will respond. And I was just going to go into that. Someone by the name of Sam in the comments said Obama, Clinton, Biden for sure. And that's one thing I really wish that Hillary Clinton, because Hillary Clinton, here we go. Here we go. Hillary Clinton, during the time we had incidents occur in the sky, when it came down to the helicopter, when it came down to the airplanes, here comes Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton, during the time, in response to all of this commotion going on, her response was aviation never had these issues prior, and now they're bringing in people that they're not even old enough to rent a car. That came out of Hillary Clinton's mouth recently. That came out of Hillary Clinton's mouth. Why am I bringing her up? Because it goes back to, you have to be careful when you say things, if it's true or not. Because people tensions are so high now. People tensions are so high. If you're a Democrat, if you're Republican, if you're conservative, we do not need someone like Hillary Clinton, who's not in office anymore, to throw her little 2 cents in when there is no solution behind it. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Because if we really want to take it there, Or we can go all the way back. We can go all the way back, Hillary Clinton. See, this is why you have to be careful what you say, how you say things. Have to. Now, when it comes down to the USAID, and thank you guys for coming in. Please hit that like button. Please subscribe to the channel. When it comes down to the USAID, yes, Elon Musk did give false information. He did give false information because he put it out there stating that 50 million condoms were sent out to Gaza instead a province known as Mozambique received $50 million of condoms. And I will spell it out for those who will try me, or better yet, I will put it in the comments for those who will try me of this providence. I will put it in the comments for you guys in regards to what Elon Musk misspoke of, because USA, they did not provide 50 million to Gaza as far as when it came down to condoms. They sent it to this particular providence. Okay, and when it came down to this particular providence, Elon Musk admitted he was incorrect. He admitted it. But then the question goes back. Watch this. The question goes back. Why did the USAID send 50 million of that to any place? It makes no sense. It makes no sense. And why do I mention that? Why do I mention that? Because look at what's going on here in America. We live in a country, for those who don't know, here in America, right? You have a number of STDs in the rise in certain states of the United States. You have STDs on the rise, right? And I want people to also understand this here in the state that I live in the city that I live in, right? They apply pressure when it comes down to the LGBTQIA plus community, when it comes down to protection, when it comes down to medication. But my question is, once again, why was 50 million sent to the providence that I have pinned in regards to what I spoke about just now? But why do we still have STDs high on a rise in certain states here in America? It makes no sense. It makes no sense. Now, I will say this. When it comes down to the USA, something cannot continue, like the corruption, it cannot continue. Something had to be dealt with. It had to. Because like I stated before, the USA was created by John F. Kennedy to assist when it came down to international assistance during the Cold War. During the Cold War. And also, I will mention this, USAID was used was used to help also in response to communication between Russia and China influence. Remember what I said, Russia and China influence. This is USA. This is the creation. During the time of the Cold War, and also it was used in response to Russia and China influence. Now, how and why am I'm putting Russia and China into this? China, if you guys don't know, China is already in a position, I'm going to be honest, where countries are depending on them. Other countries are already depending on China right now. It's not. And at this particular time, I want people to really sit back and look at the whole spectrum, right? Because when it's all said and done, we're during the times where people are so upset, as far as if you're Republican, Democrat, conservative, if you're this, and then look what's going on. Look what's going on while all of this is going about. Just take a look. And even when it comes down to the congressional hearing yesterday, they're so upset at Elon Musk and Donald Trump. They're not even dealing with the real issues or having a real conversation when it comes down to homelessness here in America. They're not even dealing with it. They're not. They're not talking about the education system here. They're not. They're not talking about how is it billions and billions of dollars are being sent out to all these other countries, right? But who is really looking out for people here as far as Congress? These are people that we voted for. I'm just saying. Now, in this week, Donald Trump, like I stated, he has made a lot of noise, and I will say I don't know why he did this. He signed an executive order to stop the making of pennies, to stop the making of paper straws. Yes, he's actually signed an executive order for that. And yes, I actually concur. Shout out to That Green Vegan said it. Don't get distracted. We need to help America. And shout out to That Green Vegan. Timothy says at least once, I think, maybe twice. Going into the comments. Shout out to Northern Dame. Thank you for coming in. Thank you so much. Reading the comments. Thank you so much, you guys, for coming in. And like I stated, you guys, I'm reading the comments right now. My apologies. Yes, KP, I absolutely agree when it comes down to Hillary Clinton. She was very upset. Shout out to KP. And thank you guys for coming in, reading the comments. Thank you guys for coming in. Northern Dame says, I've never eaten cats nor dogs myself. I'm reading the comments. I apologize, you guys. And shout out to the Herbal Goddess. Shout out to Timothy Clifford said, kickbacks. Yes. Focus on the bigger picture. Yes, focus on the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is there's too many agencies that has been formulated, that have formed here in America, and they are not doing anything. They're not doing anything. USAID is not doing anything. And to top it all off, in response to the judge ruling in favor of Trump administration, in response to labor leaders and unions filing lawsuit against Trump administration, right? The bigger question now, what is going to be the move? What is going to be the next move? And why do I say that? Because a number of jobs and agencies have been cut. And in some areas, they say upwards of 70%. 70% as far as job cuts, federal job cuts. So what's going to be the move now? And further in the news this week, Department of Justice, like I stated, ruled to dismiss all of Eric Adams' federal charges in New York. And the 64-year-old mayor, Eric Adams, was charged with multiple counts that included fraud and bribery, to which he faced upwards of 35 years in federal prison. He was indicted under the same district that currently houses entrepreneur, rapper, and actor Sean Combs, aka Diddy. And this is the Southern District of New York. Why am I bringing this up? Because, like I stated, people are asking, is this corruption itself when it comes down to Eric Adams? Should Eric Adams have been, should he have been not, should I say, should his charges should have stayed? Should the charges have remained? Because I'm going to be honest, there were a number of charges, federal charges against Eric Adams pertaining to fraud and bribery, right? So going back into the comments, Northern Dame says there's controversy about banning pennies because the pricing would be a nickel more added, I heard. Yes. And shouts out to Northern Dame. Shouts out to Northern Dame for that comment. This is why Donald Trump's administration, they said it has been a number of wasted spending. A number of wasted spending. Your Quantum says it costs 3.7 cents to make a penny. That's really smart. And this is why I say, it is just ridiculous how much overspending we have done here when it comes down to, our Congress, when it comes down to here in America. It is ridiculous. And it's even more ridiculous when somebody such as Trump himself comes in and tries to do something, but he still gets clouded for it. He still gets clouded for it. It is ridiculous. I don't understand it. And this is why now, of course, you have people, stating, well, Donald Trump has done too much. He's done too much. And even with him doing all of this, eggs have risen. The price of eggs have risen. Inflation is still high. But I want people to understand all of that takes time. It takes time. It takes time. Because $36 trillion, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of debt. That is a lot. And people have to really, really ask themselves, just how did we get to that? How did we get to that amount? It makes no sense. And thank you guys for coming in. Please hit that like button. Please subscribe to the channel. This is Politic Graham. Thank you guys for coming in. We are talking about, should Donald Trump be impeached? That's the question. Should he be impeached? Now, like I stated, in my personal opinion on this, no, I don't think he should be impeached. I don't think he should be impeached. Because something has to give. Something has to give at this point. We don't have time. We don't have time to continue to criticize and say, well, this person and that. I mean, we have to focus on, just like what that green vegan stated, the bigger picture. The bigger picture. And shout out to your moms. I cannot repeat your whole name, your mom. But your mom says, why would you impeach someone that's trying to save this country? Your mom, what is up with that name in the chat? What is up with that name? Oh my God. That name in the chat. The Herbal Goddess. Shout out to the Herbal. Going back into the comments. Thank you guys for coming in. Timothy says, I don't think most of them ever cared. They cared about money. Some of their decision made them. KP says the money is protected by guards, but not our children. Carson says, Timothy, you seem like a very intelligent brother, whether you're black or not. Going into the comments, thank you guys for coming in. And my apologies, I am so behind. I'm just not looking at the comments. My apologies. And shout out to the herbal. Thank you so much. Now, when it comes down to what's going on, I will say this. Yes, there needs to be a change, but I do not feel that Donald Trump needs to be impeached. I feel that he needed to take action. Someone needed to take a stand and make a stand, because what's been going on in the past, as you can see, it has not made anything better. It's not. It's not. Inflation is high. And I will say this also in the news this week. I will also congratulate the fact that Donald Trump did say, and I would just have to see it, but Donald Trump did state, according to the press secretary, Carolyn Leavitt, she stated that the president did speak with Putin, the president of Russia, Putin, in regards to hopefully starting negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. Because people have to understand, these wars, when it comes down to the spending, the United States was also assisting when it came down to spending. This is why, we're something has to take a stand. Someone has to take a stand. Because you guys, let's be honest, when it comes down to Joe Biden, and much respect to Joe Biden, but nobody was talking about negotiations. Nobody was talking about negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. Nobody was talking about that. And then even with Joe Biden, even with him, you had an inflation, and it's still here. And I want people to understand this, especially for the congressionals. Please understand this. Please don't expect the 47th president, Donald Trump, and Trump's administration to make $36 trillion just disappear within 4 years. It's just not going to happen. It's not. Now, I will say this, because I will do another live. I will try. Let me not make no promises. Hold up, because there's a lot going on in my life. There's a lot going on in my life. There's a lot going on in my life. Northern Dame says, there's a controversy about banning pennies because pricing would be a nickel. I've heard. Going back into the comments, and my apologies for being so behind in the chat. And that's one thing I also wanted to talk about when it came down to Russia. People have been talking about Russia and the President Putin so bad. How is it? It just rolled over people's heads when it came down to China. It just rolled over people's heads. Like, I mean, all of this money that China has made, And all of this, and it just went over people's heads, but everybody's so concerned about Russia. I don't get it. Your mom's is a trip. I cannot understand. Your mom, I cannot put you in the I cannot highlight your comment because of your name. And shout out to the herbal. The herbal says he's doing what he's doing what should have been done years ago. I concur. I absolutely agree. Shout out to the herbal. We have to take a stand, ladies and gentlemen. Have to. And thank you guys for coming in. Please hit that like button. Please subscribe to the channel. If you would like to support the channel, please, if you would like to, you can, once this live in, you can watch this. Watch this. That does help. Replaying this, watching this to support the channel. Also, you can provide a super sticker if you would like. And last but not least, you can hit the like button. And thank you guys for coming in. I appreciate all of the support. And I'm reading the comments. Thank you so much, you guys. Thank you so much. Now, I will say this. I hope that we all have a good day today. Look, because I will try to do another live. Look, I'm crossing my fingers. I'm crossing, hoping and praying. But I will say this. I hope everyone has a great, phenomenal day today. Reading the comments. Dart says, going against the status quo will help America tremendously. Is going on now because it seems as if a number of politicians, they are just, how can I say it? It seems as if they are for themselves and not for the people that voted them in. I repeat, it seems as if a number of politicians are for themselves and not for the people that voted them in. Now, you can take it how you want to take it. You can flip it how you want to flip it. But I will say look at Michelle Obama. She had all this to say, telling women to listen and saying all of this, saying that men have to do better by women. And she hasn't been seen, heard, or found. She hasn't been seen or found. What's going on? I think this would be the time she would speak. You have a number of undocumented immigrants being sent back to their countries and families being separated. Why don't she speak? Why don't she speak up? And my thing is, now we're in a position where people want to say, well, what about the people? What about the people? Democrats, politicians, even Republicans. This is when I knew we were in for a show, right? We were in for a show. When our current president, Donald Trump, gives women back their rights when it comes down to being treated fairly in sports by not allowing biological men to be in the same events as women, that was a problem. They said that was a problem. But on the flip side, someone such as Amber Thurman, who, and if you guys don't know who Amber Thurman is, Amber Thurman was a woman here in Georgia that was pregnant, and because she was denied here in Georgia to have the choice, I'll say it that way, have the choice. If you know what I mean, have the choice. She made the decision because the doctor refused her request when it came down to taking a medication in response to having a baby. She made the decision to go to a whole nother state to get the medication. Now, when it comes down to Democrats, they say, well, women are supposed to have power over their body. Yes, I agree with that. But the thing is, my thing is this. Whatever happened to telling a woman to be mindful of the medications that you take? Because I want people to understand, when it comes down to Amber Thurman, she's no longer here. There's consequences. There's consequences. I mean, you had USA, and you have these number of agencies. They're supposed to speak about health, education on health. Why didn't anybody speak to Amber Thurman about the educating herself as far as medication? And shout out to John. I just couldn't say it, but you said it for me. And that is why I feel the way I feel. I feel that if you don't want to have a child, you should not use certain medications. You should not use certain medications once you have became pregnant. I'll say it that way, for YouTube purposes. You shouldn't. Because remember what I spoke about earlier in this live. USA, they sent 50 million condoms to a Providence that I pinned in this chat, but they didn't put that same energy here in America. Amber Thurman would be alive today, ladies and gentlemen. She would be alive today. Why did Amber Thurman make that decision to leave Georgia and go to another state to get medication? And she ended up coming back to Georgia and having an issue to the point she had to go to a hospital here. And the hospital here was so scared to touch her due to the laws that our governor signed when it came down to the 20-week rule. They waited hours before they made a decision to operate on Miss Thurman. But it was too late. But remember what I said. All of this could have been avoided. All of this could have been avoided. And now look. Amber Thurman's family is suing the hospital. I'm not going to say the name of the hospital. Amber Thornton. I'll pin it. Shout out to Northern Dame. I'll pin it. Shout out to Northern Dame Amber Thornton. My apologies. Now, she would be alive today. I'll give you another example. Here in the news, here in America, in the news, in Detroit. Remember when I spoke about homelessness? Remember when I spoke about that here in America? Recently, there was a lady, she could not provide for her 5 children. They ended up sleeping in a parking lot garage in Detroit. And 2 of her 5 children are not here. Why? And it's so odd to me. And they spoke to the mother. And she said she tried to reach out for help. She tried to reach out for assistance. But how is it something has to happen for people to react? Is ridiculous to me. That is what happened to Amber Thornton. Something huge had to happen for Amber Thornton's voice to be heard. And even with the mother who had 5 kids, something huge had to happen for her voice to be heard and say, I need help. My children and I need help. I'm homeless. I reached out for help. I reached out to the shelter. This is what we have going on here. And see, this is why I have nothing to say to some of these congressional politicians. I have nothing to say to them except shame on you. Shame on you. And while everyone is trying to pick a fence about Elon Musk, and I'm going to be honest, it is a shame that we're in a state that we're worrying about whether somebody like Elon Musk is a citizen, how much Elon Musk is worth, when you need to be answering or asking the question, how is it somebody like Amber Thornton couldn't get the help? When you need to be asking the question, how is it another mother of 5 kids couldn't get the help? It makes no sense. And when it comes down to these different agencies that Donald Trump is showing and saying that there has been wasted money, overspending, mishandling, it has been not handled accordingly. If the funds would have been handled accordingly, here in America would not be $36 trillion in debt. And on top of that, I'm going to stand on it, somebody like Amber Thornton would still be here today. And I'm telling you that now. And I'm really upset at the fact, shame on you, Kamala Harris, shame on you for promoting your quote unquote election for people to vote for you by bringing Amber Thornton's family in a campaign commercial. Shame on you. And shame on you, Oprah Winfrey, for having the family on a show during the time Kamala Harris was running for president. Because I tell you right now, that mother in Detroit, no mother should be in a van with 5 kids in the cold. No mother should be in a van in a parking garage with 5 children between the ages of 2 and 9 years old. Now, I would tell you this. It makes no sense. And this is where it comes down to. This is where it comes down to this what they call education, health education. When it comes down to being able to provide resources. This is when it comes down to resources that have been mishandled. And my apologies on my end. I apologize. I'm going through a lot on my end as far as like phones ringing. And yes, shout out to Ja, shout out to Narendra, shout out to the Herbal. Now I will say yes. And Ja, I don't know if you want me to highlight what you said. I'm going to highlight what you said. Now, Ja says, and I quote, "No, I think you should have morals to have a baby." That's what Ja said. Now, Ranger says, "I agree with Politic." The Herbal says, "Exactly, Politic." Now, when it comes down to, and I'm reading the comments, KP says, when illegal immigrants are in 5-star hotels on our tax dollars, but our family gets left in the street to figure it out. Let me highlight that, KP. Shout out to KP. Shout out to KP. Let me highlight that. I have to highlight that. That was KP. You hit the mark. You hit the mark, KP. Shout out to KP. That green vegan, I'm going to get you that green. Now, I want people to say this. I'm going to say this. These are the times that I feel the former First Lady Michelle Obama should speak up. And I'm not saying it because of a race. I'm not saying it because she's a certain race. I'm not doing that. But look at what she stated during a rally for Kamala Harris. Look at what she stated as far as women, as far as men needing to do better by us women. Where was the man for Amber Thornton? Where was the man, or better yet, where was the politicians? Where were the people? Period. And Northern Dame, yes, she did reach out. Northern Dame says, "I'm wondering if that woman with the 5 kids in Detroit had reached out for help and assistance." Yes, she did. She did. And now there's been an investigation on it. Because remember what I stated. Remember what I stated earlier. Something big has to happen for them to do something, right? Something big has to happen before anybody does anything. So when it comes down to this mother of 5, she did reach out for assistance, and there was a press conference that was held. And according to what was discussed in the press conference, when she reached out, parties did not reach back out to her. Right? Now, I will say this, she didn't reach out. Now, this is where it's going to be more investigation, because now people are saying, well, she didn't reach out to us, but she reached out to over here, but she reached, like, now we're having an investigation. Now we're having an actual investigation. But KP said it best. When illegal immigrants are in 5-star hotels on our tax dollars, but our people get left in the street to figure it out for themselves. And that is why we're in a position now. And this is why I wish House of Representatives and House of Senate, will have conversations about this. Because at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, a number of people lives will be affected to come. And when I say to come, if the House of Representatives continue to go back and forth and what I feel on miscellaneous things, and when I say miscellaneous things in the such that, oh, well, Elon Musk, I caught him lying on this. Guess what? Is what Elon Musk did and what he's doing, is that the cause of Amber Thornton not being here? Is that the cause of the lady with 5 kids who 2 of her children passed away? Is that the reason? Because of Elon Musk? No. No. So I really wish that these so-called people, and the reason I'm wording it like that is because people who have, it seems as if some individuals who have the money, as they say, like Oprah Winfrey, she would rather have her production company charge Kamala Harris' campaign over $1 million instead of helping families in need. Now, I'm not telling people to give handouts. I'm not doing that. But my thing is this. We have to do better. And we have to speak up. And I really applaud that somebody is taking a stand. And when I say somebody, Donald Trump, you may not agree. Look, you may not agree. We may not agree with everything that he's doing, right? But you can't take it away at how much money has been wasted. You can't. Too much money has been wasted. And if Congress doesn't get together and work it out, please. I'm telling you right now, with those federal workers who signed that buyout with Donald Trump administration, yes. Because Democrats were telling them don't sign it. Unions were telling them don't sign it. Because according to the buyout, if you agree, they will pay you up until September the 14th of this year. But the issue is Congress only agreed to March, until March the 14th. That's the issue. So my thing is this. I hope Congress gets it together, because for those that signed that buyout after March the 14th, it's in Congress' hands. Now, if Donald Trump can make it work, Elon Musk can make it work, because according to what was signed recently, all right, that ends next month. It ends next month. So this is why I say, and I hope Congress gets it together and come down to some type of resolution where they can at least meet Republicans halfway. Democrats can meet Republicans halfway, because I mean, people don't want to hear it, but it's the truth. Republicans are majority in the House of Representatives, the House of Senate, and you see who is the president, Republican. So I hope people understand that, because KP said it best. How is it illegal immigrants were in 5-star hotels in New York, calling New York out, Mayor Eric Adams, but our people are left, when they say our people, Americans are left in the streets to figure it out. Figure it out. It makes no sense. And thank you guys for coming in. Going back into the comments. Timothy says, having schools teach children and teens about LGBTQIA plus is berserk to me. It should not be something you teach or talk about with children. You can do that. I agree. Shout out to Timothy. And that's another thing. Why do we need to make school more difficult than what it is? Why do we need to make school any more difficult than what it is? And why do I say that? You have children making it all the way to high school, still can't read. Why is that? Still cannot read. And then those that can read, that can do math, they're dropping out. They are dropping out. Ask yourself these questions, people. I want you guys to ask yourself these questions. You don't think it was a political game when Joe Biden wanted to ban TikTok? You don't think it was a political game, or you don't think it was political retribution? Because TikTok has been making billions. But watch this. The CEO of TikTok said, well, I don't have my children on TikTok. I don't have my children watching TikTok. But how is it your children, some of the children, and shout out to Kim Kardashian's child, Northwest, her and her mom's TikTok page. Making money, might I add. How is it teenagers and kids are constantly on TikTok, but the CEO of TikTok said, well, I don't have my children on TikTok. I don't have my children are not even allowed to watch TikTok or use TikTok. But TikTok is the same business where people were doing videos during the time just prior to Donald Trump bringing TikTok back on the platform. People were begging Joe Biden to not ban it. People were saying, this is how I make a living. This is how I make a living. So now we're in the time, or should I say times, where people are making TikTok videos saying, I don't go to work. My job is TikTok. And my child makes a nice amount of money from TikTok, from YouTube, from Instagram, from Facebook. And look at what's going on. Look who was standing on January the 20th during the inauguration. You had the founder of CEO, you had the founder and CEO of Facebook, you had TikTok CEO, you had Elon Musk, you had all these top tier billionaires. But it is so odd to me. The House of Representatives, they're so focused on what Elon Musk is doing. It's beyond me. Going back into the comments, thank you guys for listening. Please hit that like button. Please subscribe to the channel. This is Politic Graham. And if you would like to support the channel, you can provide a super sticker if you wish. Shout out to that green vegan. Shout out to that green vegan. Narendra says yes. Hit the like and subscribe. Thank you so much. Shout out to Narendra. Timothy says not like an actual license to have children, but some very enforced consequences at least. KP says Michelle is bought. Northern Dame says I'm wondering if that woman with 5 kids in Detroit had reached out for help. And like I stated, when it comes down to, these resources are being mishandled, overspent, it is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. And shout out to Jaja says, race isn't important. You are American or whatever country you're from. Now, I will say this. When it comes down to the race, and I will talk about Kash Patel in the next live. I promise I will, because Kash Patel, he stated how his race, was attacked. He stated it. And this coming out of Kash Patel's mouth. This is Kash Patel. But I do feel that when it comes down to what's going on now, I think this is a time where we need to unite, no matter what race you are, no matter what gender you are, no matter what culture you are. Because I'm telling you right now, based off of what President Trump is trying to do when it comes, even with Joe Biden, but I'll say this. Well, I'm not gonna get back and forth because I don't want to make it Joe Biden versus Trump. I'm not gonna do that. Now, I will say this. There was my opinion when it comes down to TikTok. TikTok is political game. Why? Because the argument is, right? Well, TikTok can still be displayed here in America if US owns half of it. You don't think that's political game? It's about money. Because remember what I said, TikTok is worth billions. The Ranger, I'm going to get you. The Ranger says Cash Patel is my relative. The Ranger. Thank you guys for coming in. Thank you so much for the like. Now, this is why people have to open your eyes. Oh, yes, Narendra, I know. Yes, Narendra. Yes, Cash Patel is. Yes, Cash Patel is an Indian American. And I want to make a specific time for Mr. Cash Patel because I really feel, I don't know why they have not moved forward with confirming, because I'm telling you right now, he should not be the worries. He should not be Congress worries. I would just leave it at that. I'm not going to say no names, but I will say this. Cash Patel should be your least worries, because take this into notation. Cash Patel was under Trump's administration the first term, when Donald Trump was the 45th president, right? He should be your least concern. And I feel that it's not right for them to put a pause on confirming him. It's not right. Because at this particular time, when it comes down to Cash Patel, that is when I wonder, what is the holdup? What is really the holdup? And it seems as if these politicians are so frustrated with Donald Trump, they're taking their frustrations out on other people that is associated with Donald Trump. But like I stated, your least worry should be him, and I'm gonna just leave it at that, because ask yourself this question: who is having conversations with who? Who has signed the most executive orders a president has ever signed in history? So like I stated, your least worries should be Cash Patel. Cash Patel is working for somebody. This is why I say politicians need to work together. This is why I say politicians need to work together. Going back into the comments, Carlton, shout out to Carlton Williams says, going back into the comments. My brothers and sisters, this is no time to blame the white man. That white man did that did us harm. These are not them, because most of the time none of us have what we want anyway. Now, I will say this in response to Carlton Williams. Here in the city that I live in, it is also known as quote unquote Black Hollywood. Here in Georgia, it's a city, they call it Black Hollywood. And I'm going to be very, very frank. Okay? I'm going to be very straight up. Even though this is called quote unquote Black Hollywood, let's just say it is the biggest corruption ever. Biggest corruption. It is huge. Now, there was, and I'll give an example. I give a couple examples here in Atlanta. That's also known as quote unquote Black Hollywood. Here in Atlanta, we have city councilmen that act as if they want to make quote unquote organizations to feed the hungry, right? But when we talk about corruption, these city council, I'm not going to say who, no names just yet, because I'm going to do a video. There is specific city councilmen here in Atlanta that has connected with smaller organizations and develop an organization stated they're going to feed the hungry, but they use the meals that's being donated to them for themselves. And how do I know that? Because I actually spoke to these individuals. I spoke to them. I witnessed it. I was in the line. I witnessed them telling people to go in this line, park in this line, and then making a VIP area for people who connected with the city and giving them the food. Whereas here I am actually getting food for people who don't have transportation, for people who have had multiple strokes in my neighborhood, for a single mom herself who's not able to go. But what is it that these city councilmen do? They get these other organizations, these smaller organizations, to get together to make a quote unquote business plan so they can reach out to HelloFresh. Yes, I'm calling them out. And they use the food for themselves. They don't give a darn about you. But you know what? Like I stated, Cash Patel shouldn't be your worries. It shouldn't be your worries. It's the people that's already in. It's the people that's already in. And see, this is why companies such as Kroger's, Walmart, Harry's, Publix, HelloFresh, that's why these companies are putting their hands up like, hey, I don't know if I can give food out. I don't know if I can give donations out. Because even that's being mishandled. And see, this is why people have to take a stand. And I'm glad somebody like Trump is taking a stand. And also in my city, I want to state this. Shout out to Keisha Lance Bottoms. Keisha Lance Bottoms was once a mayor here in Atlanta, but she left. She went to Washington, D.C. to work for Joe Biden. And then after she worked for Joe Biden didn't trust her no more than assist in running a campaign for Kamala Harris. Oh, for those who don't know, Keisha Lance Bottoms is the one that Donald Trump, he put her out on blast and said that you're fired. Look it up. If you don't believe me, don't take my word for it. Look it up. So when people say, "Oh, why don't our black brothers and black sisters get together?" This is what our black brothers and black sisters do. And see, this is why I don't make it a quote unquote black and white thing. This is why I stand. Shout out to KP. KP said it best. And even that green vegan. The bigger picture is we have to work together. We have to work together. It makes no sense. And Miss Angry Bee said it best. Shout out to Miss Angry Bee. Miss Angry Bee says, stand together as Americans. Thank you. I got to highlight that. Shout out to Miss Angry Bee. Stand together. Northern Dame says, right, of course. Northern Dame says, right, of course. Why are there 12th graders that can only read on a 3rd grade level? Exactly. This should be the concerns. So I want people to just look at the whole spectrum, the bigger picture. And Timothy Clifford says, I'm kind of American, not North American at least. Well, I will say this, Timothy. You must just been coming out earlier. I had stated earlier in this live, I said this affects not only here in America, but it affects all over the world. It affects all over the world of what's going on. When it comes down to these different agencies that the America formed, such as USAID, or created. And even right down to how things are being handled when it comes down to tariffs. This is why I say we have to work together. And also, if you guys know, I always say I never put my burdens in anybody's lap. I don't like putting my burdens in anybody's lap. I don't. I do not like to put my burdens in anybody's lap. I think now we as a people, and when I say people, Americans, no matter what race, culture, gender you are, need to work together. And I'm telling you right now, the way Donald Trump is doing it, he's trying to put it back. He's trying to put the responsibilities back into the states. But remember what I said, what's going on here in Atlanta. Remember what I said. You have city councilmen, they can't even get in, they can't even agree to disagree. And it is so much mishandling of funds. It's not even funny. So much mishandling of funds. Bonnie Willis still thinks she can get Donald Trump out. She still thinks she can convict Donald Trump, even as her being the quote unquote district attorney of Fulton County. She still thinks she can do that. And if you guys been following my page, you will know when it comes down to Bonnie Willis, that's the most corrupt of them all. But how is it she was able to be voted back in for another term as Fulton County District Attorney for a second term? Anyway, all I will say this before I go, I thank you guys for coming in. I hope Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, I hope Pam Bondi and Department of Justice also looks at Bonnie Willis. I hope they look at her too. I also hope, it is my hope that these states really look at the people and stop going back and forth amongst themselves. And if you are here in America and you vote, just know you have a voice. You have a voice. And thank you guys for coming in. Shout out to Carlton Williams. Shout out to KP. Shout out to Miss Angry B. KP says Bondi scares me. I'm not sure what she's going to do without her second. Now, I will agree, like I stated, look, let the show begin, as they say. But I want people to know not to be in fear and stand together, work together. Carlton Williams says, great live. I don't know your name, but great live. Carlton Williams, I go by Politic Graham. Thank you so much for coming in, Carlton Williams. Much love, much appreciation. I hope you guys hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Reading the comments.